Emilia-Romagna.
Mr. Renato Di Rocco, President of the Italian Cycling Federation and UCI, Vice President.
Renato Di Rocco, Presidente della Federazione Ciclistica Italiana e Vicepresidente dell'Unione Ciclistica Internazionale.
And Mr. Marco Selleri, Director of the Organizing Committee.
E Marco Selleri, Direttore del Comitato Organizzatore Imola Emilia Romagna 2020.
In third place and winner of the bronze medal, representing Switzerland, Mark Hirschi.
Al terzo posto, che vincitore
A great few weeks for Mark Hirschi. The Swiss rider takes the bronze medal in the World Championships. Former under-23 world champion. The Belgian team did so much riding today. Wout van Aert takes the silver medal. And the new world champion is about to arrive on stage. Julian Alaphilippe is the world champion. A huge moment for Julian Alaphilippe. A few congratulations before we see we hear the national anthem.
Complimenti per questi 36 stati da parte della Presidente dell'UCI, della Presidente del
Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of our new world champion, we present the national anthem of France.
Signore e signori, in onore del nuovo campione del mondo, la vostra attenzione per l'inno nazionale della Francia.
A career-defining moment for Julian Alaphilippe in the rainbow jersey as the world champion. There's our podium. They produced some race, didn't they?
Yep, they really, really did. And the Belgians, they did so well. They deserved to have a medal, as did the French. They really animated this entire race.
Quick photographs for the future with no masks on.
It's certainly a pleasure to be here in Imola for the 2020 Road World Championships of the UCI. See you next year in Belgium.
What a few weeks for these three riders. Just a reminder then of the results. Julian Alaphilippe is the world champion for France. Wout van Aert from Belgium takes second, and Mark Hirschi of Switzerland takes the bronze medal. Here's the rest of the riders who featured in this year's race and completed today's course. More riders have now finished. All these riders will have got some story to tell after a World Championship. They always do. So many of them tried to set their teammates up. 62 riders completed the course. Nance Peters there at the top. He was the rider who, with Quentin Pacher, set everything up for the attack of Julian Alaphilippe. Another big attack by Guillaume Martin put the Belgian team on the back foot, and he finally delivered on his promise to win the World Championship.
That's easy, yeah? Look at the camera and smile when you're signing. Perfect. Can we move the camera out of the way?
Julian signing his name on the rainbow jersey.
Good man. Super, thank you. Hold the whole thing. And again, just 1 second if you can. Thank you.
A few things he has now to do, as always. As a world champion, he'll be fully in demand.
And the best part is we don't have to wait till next season to see him race in the rainbow bands. We've still got the Giro d'Italia, the Vuelta, so many races to go.
We're going to leave you with the sights and sounds of a great race. Julian Alaphilippe is the world champion. From me, Anthony McCrossan, and Lucy Martin alongside me, thanks for watching. We'll be back next year. Bye for now.
It's just an extra stress to go all the way back to the team car. It's different if you're in a Grand Tour and you're rolling along and you're on wide roads and there's nothing too stressful happening. But here, you can just see from the front of the peloton to the back of the peloton, it's a really long way. So if you're then going back to your team car because you missed the bottle and it's an important, crucial moment in the race, it's going to take you kilometres to get back, no matter how strong you are. And riders can do it. Riders will be doing it today because they'll be working for their teammates, their leaders. But finally, it's just an extra way to burn your matches, to use those extra bits of energy, effort to go back mentally, physically. You're trying to then battle back to the front. And in that way, most of these riders today will have started completely prepared. The only issue is, do they take off clothing or do they actually keep it on, because it is getting a bit warmer today. But if it rains, it's not getting too much warmer, is it? I think it only goes up about 3 degrees in the entire day. So the majority of riders probably can keep on the clothes. I think I saw Simon Clark actually earlier on, one of the Australians. He was completely wrapped up. He even had leg warmers on. I don't think it's that cold.
He must feel the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some riders with leg warmers on. Good choice if they're feeling a little bit chilly. But it is unusual, isn't it, when you've been used to the last few weeks, which has been relatively warm. The Tour de France was very warm all the time, apart from one day. And then when you suddenly go to the cold weather, you feel the cold a little bit more, don't you? And the riders have just got to make sure they don't burn energy as fast as they potentially might do, and they just keep themselves fueled up. You can see the arm warmers are definitely on, there's no doubt about that, but they've just got to keep themselves going all the way through this race. Throughout the race you're going to see shots of, I'm sure, the Marco Pantani fan club, because we are very close to Rimini, where sadly Marco passed away, and Cesena, where he was born, is around 40-50k away from this particular circuit. This is the home area of Marco Pantani. Peloton then over the top of this climb, 208 kilometres to go. Rolling themselves down the other side now, right on the top of the world here as they go across the ridge. Luis Menkes sitting always towards the back of the group. Just in behind him is Joseph Cherney, rides for CCC. Another member of the British team just in front as well. That's probably Hugh Carthy, although I can't quite see. He generally sits right on the back of the peloton, the same way that Adam Yates did pretty much during the Tour de France. 6:15 the advantage for our leading group of riders. Cochrane, Friedrich, Fomenich, Arashiro, Grosso and Castillo. Peloton in one long line as they make their way down this descent at the moment. Here's our front group of riders. The Norwegian rider in here with the yellow helmet is Torsten Train. He rides for the team of UNO-X. Their kit is yellow and red, which is why he's wearing that kind of yellow coloured helmet. He'll ride with them next season as well. He was second in the Tour of Malopolska and also second in the International Tour of Rhodes. Second in the Lillehammer Grand Prix. Comes from Ornevos in Norway. 25 years of age, Torsten Train. Good to see him in this group. Has ridden a few races this season. Has had not too bad a time. Ridden about nearly 5,000 kilometres in 31 days of racing. The Danish team, though, seem to be happy to take control of the front of this race, thinking about Jakob Fuglsang later on today. That team very strong with Nicholas Ige, Jonas Gregard, Jesper Hansen, Frølich Honor, Michael Volgren, Chris Juhl Jensen, Kasper Pedersen is the team with Jakob Fuglsang. We're getting towards 200 kilometres to go now. So we've broken the back of this race. We've started to get into it. Still the peloton is rolling along, holding this at 6:11. They don't seem to want to let this go out too much now. They seem to want to hold this gap underneath the 7 minutes.
Yeah, is this what you would have expected to see Denmark and Switzerland taking on the chase at the front? I mean, we've still got a long way to go, so they're controlling the peloton, but they've pretty much been the two teams at the front of the whole day, really just pacing the break and just keeping it around the 6 minute mark.
Yeah, for me there's got to be a team that's taken the initiative, and it looks like Denmark have decided this is what we're going to do. We're going to set the tempo with Switzerland. We're quite happy with the whole scenario here, but we're not going to make this race hard where we have to close a 10-minute gap. We're going to hold it around about 6 minutes and then use our momentum later to just bring the breakaway back whenever we're ready. Still the wind is picking up a little bit, but it's not too bad. There's a nice shot there of Thorsten Train, who we were just talking about earlier on, as we make our way across the ridge, heading towards the next climb.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see what Jonas Koch from Germany does in the breakaway, because he's currently riding for the team CCC, and of course CCC will no longer sponsor the team next year, so I think there's a lot of riders scrambling around trying to find contracts. I'm not sure if he has a contract yet. I've not seen anywhere that he does. 27-year-old, so although he's racing for Germany and he's obviously got a role here to play in the World Championships, it's good to have the opportunity to go in the breakaway, kind of expose yourself a bit more if you're looking for a contract, and maybe he has a contract, but we're unaware at the moment. He's just come from the Tour de France, so he's got good legs. Maybe tired, but he certainly doesn't feel tired if he's jumped into the breakaway, and he's happy to go into that move. So it's good when when riders, what we were saying, normally from smaller nations might go into the move rather than a big nation like Germany. But yeah, interesting to see what so many riders from CCC will be doing next year.
Yeah, so far we've got no news on the team. The understanding is they're still looking for a sponsor, but it hasn't happened yet. We wish them all the best in trying to find a sponsor for next season. There's other teams that are still looking for sponsors as well. We think about Axel Merckx's Axion Hagen Berman's team, which is the best development team in the world, no doubt whatsoever, and they still don't have a sponsor. The world of sponsorship is quite difficult right now, particularly to get a sponsor to spend millions of pounds and millions of euros or dollars into looking after a team. But the return that we can see at races like the Tour de France is exceptional, as our helicopter shot brings us these beautiful ridge shots of the riders working their way across the top. I thought yesterday the shot of Anna van der Breggen was one of the best film shots I'd seen in a bike race.
Yeah, they've had the practice and now they're doing it again today. I'm sure we'll see many more of those helicopter shots. So great. Yeah, in terms of sponsorship, it really is an interesting, weird year, isn't it, for many reasons. But in the world of cycling as well, obviously the whole race calendar has been disrupted, and we're seeing the whole season crammed into the space of 3 months. So we've done one Grand Tour, we've still got 2 to go, and it's almost October. So it's also really different. It's not the traditional way of when you sign riders for next year, when you sign contracts for new sponsorships. It seems late, it's October, we've only got 3 months until the 2021 season starts, and teams don't have sponsors, riders don't have contracts signed, but everything's just gone out the window. All the traditional rules of when you should sign by, when's too late, when riders fill the quota, order bikes, all that kind of stuff. It's just, everything's just changed, and it'll be interesting to see in the future, in the years to come, if it's changed for good, and if we'll see a new way of the cycling world, everything happening a different way, even in terms of from a media point of view, from the way now we coordinate interviews. It's completely different, and some things are better, some things are worse, and it'll be I'm so intrigued to see what will happen in the future. And in one way, when you come to a finish line and the media jump on a rider and it's a big, it's incredible, isn't it, when you see, particularly in a race like the Tour de France, the rider crosses the line, they've won, and the media just bombard, they just jump in. And of course we've not seen that anymore. You can't get close to any riders, you have to have a 2 metre distance. So I think the riders are very pleased with that, to be honest. They can catch the breath, clean the face, and then go to a mix zone and conduct the interview, which is, for the staff, I think, team staff, and for the riders it's better. But I think for journalists, getting those real raw interviews when the riders are motive and they've just crossed the line, full of adrenaline, it's not quite the same.
It's not the same. We'll carry on talking about that in a moment as we watch the riders going across the line here. So Jonas Koch of Germany, Thorsten Train of Norway, Marco Friedrich of Austria, Daniel Fominik of Kazakhstan, Yuki Arashiro of Japan, Eduardo Grosso in the blue of Romania, and Ulises Castillo Soto of Mexico. Coming round then to complete another lap. 7 laps of racing to go. It's very calm here. There's people here, but not many people. because the finish areas are totally controlled. These riders then going out on their next lap of racing with 7 laps to go. Little bit of a tailwind as they make their way out on this Imola circuit. Torsten Train on the back. In front of him is the Mexican rider we talked about a little while ago, Ulisses Castillo-Stotto. And on the right-hand side, Daniil Fominik, the Kazakhstan rider, just spinning along, staying in the breakaway. 1.5 hours have gone of racing so far as we wait for the peloton now to arrive in Imola. Having gone over that climb, they'll descend back down and make their way here to the race finish. They go past us just in front of our commentary position. We're up in the tribunes of this famous Formula One circuit, which is rather nice to do, to be given the opportunity to sit here and watch the riders go past. And in a few hours we'll see the winner of this World Championship come into view and race up here to the finish line, which we can see dead across from our commentary box. Here's our leading group making their way onto the lower slopes of the next little rise. It goes uphill for a while through the feed. You now know, as Lucy's told you, what the riders are taking on board here in the various musettes. That's the little bags that the soigneurs have. So they'll take on bottles, they'll take on musettes. And we're coming up to that all-important 200 kilometres to go mark now. Grosso still out the saddle on all the little climbs. I think he just missed the soigneur there. He was looking at the other side of the road. There'll be another soigneur just up the road here, so he'll trying to get something. He's missed a bottle. And as we mentioned yesterday, in these COVID times, you can't take a bottle from another team.
Yeah, I think he was trying then, wasn't he? Asking anybody, just give me a bottle. And sometimes people do, you know, it's if you've got enough bottles, you've passed all your riders, but also he's in the breakaway and the staff there are waiting for the peloton. They've got 6, 7, 8 riders per team to give out bottles to, so you can't basically waste a bottle on another team member earlier on. And of course, yeah, with coronavirus, it's just not safe anymore.
This is the front of the peloton being led by Sylvain Dillier. I've just heard that on the climb at Aigle-Martigny, so we would have been riding the World Road Race Championships in Aigle today, in Martigny, it's snowing.
No, seriously?
It is. So maybe everything, as far as the perfect storm is concerned, bringing the World Championships here was the right decision, because even if they were being run in Switzerland right now, it would be snowing.
Yeah, well, sometimes things happen for a reason, and today it's a good reason. We're in Italy, we're not in Switzerland.
And the temperature there is pretty cold. I think the cold weather protocol would have also come into place for emergency measures.
Yeah, and that would have been so difficult. I mean, I always feel for the organisation when they have to amend things because of the weather protocol, whether it's too hot or too cold. But in terms of a World Championships, if you have to make it shorter or change the route last minute, it's such a shame, because the World Championships, it's who's the best rider in the world. You want it to be a really long, hard race. You don't want an easy winner. So, yeah, imagine you have to take out a whole climb of the route, or you can't even do half the distance. It's just such a shame. So, yeah, we're here today. Maybe a bit of rain, but definitely no snow.
199 kilometres to go. We are inside 200k now. These riders have got a few hours of racing remaining. The peloton rolling along at 62 kilometres an hour. The front group at 27 as they make their way up the climb. Grossu still rocking and rolling on the back of this group most of the time, but he goes through and does his work at the moment. Thank you very much for your messages. At AntMcCross and at LucyMartin05 is where you can get hold of us as we watch the peloton making its way onto this Imola course. A few hellos. Scooter Mercato, thank you very much for your message. Yes, Mark Hirschi is riding, and you're also supporting Sepp Kuss, who is riding for the USA. Bill Quinn, thanks very much for your message. Del Woodford, hello to you. Thanks very much for your message. And James De Salvio, hello and welcome to today's coverage and a warm welcome, of course, to the Couch Peloton.
Yeah, that's one rider who I have as one of my top 3 today. It has to be Michael Woods. I really feel like he could have a good race today. The rider from Canada, of course. He won a stage in Torino, and I was actually there. I drove up the course before going to the finish. It was so steep, and it was a really, really hard road surface, like real sticky, real grippy, uneven, like a typical back road in Italy. It was hard, and it was steep, and it went on and on and on. And I just remember watching him, and he attacked, and that was it. Nobody could go with him, and he just went for it. And when it came to the Queen stage, he lost a little bit of time on a longer climb. But today's not a longer climb. Today's 2 to 3 kilometre climbs, steep 2 to 3 kilometre climbs. And of course he had the awful crash in Paris-Nice where he actually broke his leg. And I think in the end he was one of the few people in the whole world who was pleased with the lockdown period, because he had time to recover while all his rivals weren't racing. They were all at home in quarantine, lockdown. So he was on the trainer recovering from a broken leg, but so was the rest of the world, almost most of the men's peloton. He didn't miss any racing, and he's come back in top form, hasn't he?
He has. The riders in the peloton just go across the line. 7 laps of racing to go. Still the peloton all intact. Our leading group of riders are onto the climb. But you mentioned Michael Woods. He's finished on the podium before. He was the bronze medalist in 2018, on that year that Alejandro Valverde finally took the world title with Romain Bardet in second place. Michael Woods, really top athlete. He was a top class runner, has run a sub 4 minute mile, and now is a top professional bike rider. I think he's a good call for a win this afternoon.
Of course, like everything, it depends how the race plays out, but in terms of the steepness of the climbs, the short 3 kilometre distance, I think he's got to be one of the favourites to fly up these climbs and actually really have a go. So it would be great to see as well. Obviously you never like to see riders crashing, and I just remember when he broke his leg in that awful crash in Paris-Nice, wouldn't that be the icing on the cake to recover from that and win a world title in the same year?
If he can do that, it would be a wonderful story. He's got the team of Guillaume Bavin, Alexander Cataford and Hugo Hull. Hugo Hull's just come out of the Tour de France. So Michael Woods could be a really strong contender this afternoon, moving from EF Pro Cycling, and he will be joining the Israel Startup Nation for next season. So lots of riders moving on teams and starting to switch to their new squads. They can't do that until January the 1st officially in their kits, but they can announce that they're going to join a new squad. So Michael Woods, I think you're right, he could be a distinct possibility for a victory this afternoon, having already finished on the podium of this World Championship. 197 kilometres to go. Peloton now going through the feed zone. They're picking up their bottles and various other things in the musettes that they can try and eat. They'll make their way on to the next climb of the day. Thinking about other teams then, Poland have got a really strong squad in here with Stanislav Anadglowski, Mikhail Goash. They've also got Kamil Malecki, Lucas Ocean, Maciej Pocierski. And stage winner in the Tour de France this year, Mikhail Kwiatkowski, after that wonderful breakaway with Richard Carapaz. Kwiatkowski's won before. He won in a breakaway in Ponferrada, jumping away just before the finish to take the victory. The chances of Mikhail Kwiatkowski and the Polish team today?
Yeah, they definitely have a really good chance, and he's shown how strong he was when he won the stage in the Tour de France, and 6 years ago as well. I feel like that was just the other day. 6 years ago he was a world champion, but he's done it before, so he can do it again. He's won races like Milan San Remo, Strade Bianche, San Sebastian. The races that they're not the same as this. This is a really, really long, hard race, but it's similar climbs, short, punchy climbs where you really need to be able to power up them. And the difference today is just how many times we go up the climbs and the distance, and the fact that there's not flat before, like the likes of Milan San Remo, flat, and then you tackle the climb. So a little bit different today, but he's certainly the kind of rider that if it's not raced super, super hard, completely for the climbers, he's like the likes of Michael Matthews, a rider that could maybe survive and go for it. And I think, yeah, it would be cool to see somebody like Kwiatkowski taking the victory again.
Let's see if he can do it. He must have huge morale after the Tour de France, as we see Danny Martinez towards the back of the peloton. I have to say, one of the most surprising announcements of the week has been Danny Martinez moving to Ineos Grenadiers from the team of EF Pro Cycling, bearing in mind that it was announced that he had an extended contract with EF Pro Cycling. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? And we saw also the likes of Pidcock getting taken up by Ineos. They announced a few riders the other day, and yeah, that was certainly the most interesting new signing. And it just shows, though, how a team like Ineos are always just thinking about the future. They're always almost a step ahead, aren't they? And picking up younger riders, picking up talent. And in the past, sometimes it's been said, you know, if you can't beat them, buy them, which is unfortunate, and that's just how sometimes it is. But I think it's quite a good move. I think he'll do well, and they've also got Adam Yates going from Mitchelton Scott to Ineos next year, so it's going to be a really strong team for them. And of course, they've come off the Tour de France. They didn't get the victory, so it's change your mindset and let's get ready for the next seasons. And who are we going to nurture? Which young talent are we going to nurture? Who's going to come and help us? And also Richie Porte. Richie Porte's gone there as well. That's him returning to where he was previously. For Trek Segafredo, that must be a moment of a little bit of bittersweet for them, because they've just ended up with him on the podium of the Tour de France. They've invested him in over that time. Richie's a great rider and a great guy as well in the peloton, and now they lose him. It's back to Ineos Grenadiers, but he's always said that was the last Tour de France he would ride to aim to win. Yeah, and he certainly gave it his all, didn't he? So, yeah, I'm sure they're very sad that he's leaving, but at the same time, he's got the result whilst riding for them. They've enabled him to jump onto the podium at the Tour de France, and he's represented Trek Segafredo. He was on the podium for Trek Segafredo, so we'll have to see what he can do in the next years, and if he does return to the Tour de France, or if he really won't do it anymore, if he said he doesn't want to. Well, he said, I think he'll support some riders, but he's not interested in going with the pressure of a team leader on his shoulders. It's not something that he enjoys. But this year, in the Trek Segafredo team, they managed that pressure really well as a squad. He's ended up on the podium of the Tour. He's got the photo he's always wanted on the podium. And now he can say, I performed at the very best level in the Tour de France. He produced an amazing time trial on the penultimate day. He was really thrilling to watch, and he's ended up with that dream come true. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, he says he doesn't like being the leader, and yet he can still perform and come third in the Tour de France. But yeah, I can understand it's a Grand Tour. It's 21 stages, and you've got to be switched on every day. It's different if you're working for someone. You do your job and then you swing off and you can cruise to the finish line, or you can pick and choose the days that you really need to work, dig deep, and for example, the time trial days, you don't need to ride hard if you're a worker. But to be a GC rider, it's every single minute of every single day. You can't lose focus, and yeah, that's really, really hard. But he didn't win, but he got on the podium, which was an incredible achievement, and he'll be one to watch today. He could have a really good shot. If it's a super hard race, I would expect him to be there in the finale of today's race. Judging by the way he was climbing in the Tour de France, I'd say Richie Porte is going to have no issues on these climbs at all. And if he can produce that day of performance like he was doing in the Tour, yeah, I don't think you can discount him at all to win this World Championship.
There's people who say he's not a winner, but I don't necessarily believe that. I think if Richie Porte gets a sniff of a rainbow jersey here, I don't discount him at all from being in the mix at the end of this year's race. It could be a big, big day for Australia in these World Championships. 6 minutes 20 for our leading group of riders. Koch of Germany, Trajan of Norway, Friedrich of Austria, Fominik of Kazakhstan, Arashiro of Japan, Grosso of Romania and Castillo of Mexico. Just wanted to come back to your conversation. You were saying about how cycling may have changed forever with the media at the finish lines and dealing with the riders and the interviews that they have to give and all that sort of thing. You're used to being with a rider at the finish when they win a race. That's what you do a lot of your time now. What is it like, and how do you think now the riders, having been with them at Tirreno, respond to not having that immediate pressure on the finish line? How has it all changed?
I think for riders it's a lot better. Of course, you've done a maximum effort, you've crossed the finish line, you've won, you've lost, you're full of emotions, full of adrenaline, and then someone shoves the camera in your face. It's hard, and some riders they don't like it, or most riders I think they don't like it. It's hard to deal with, and they're getting barged all around the place. They've got the press officers, they've got the TV cameras, the crew, they've got the bodyguards from the race trying to navigate them as quick as possible to the finish line, to the podium area. So it's a really weird dynamic. It's a weird situation, and of course, if you've just gone into the red, you've just done a maximum effort, you don't want to speak directly. You need to just calm down. Sometimes the riders can hardly even speak. They're still breathing so hard. So now with the new protocols, because of coronavirus, nobody's allowed to get near the rider. They have to go to a really special area, segregated mixed zone, with all the journalists, TV crew, more than 2 meters away. They've got time to clean the face, get the breath back, think about what's happened, calm down a little bit, and then give an interview. So, yeah, for riders, it's so much better. For TV, for journalists, for the general media, they're maybe more guaranteed to get the interviews, because instead of trying to fight off of the journalists to get that one quote or shot, they can almost guarantee it. But they're not getting the raw emotion of the finish line. And, you know, it always pops to my mind, Mark Cavendish. What was he like doing interviews, crossing the finish line, full of adrenaline, saying things he probably regretted later, or maybe not, but saying really emotive things. And that's kind of gone now. So I'm not sure what will happen, and I'm not sure in the future will we see it return to the kind of brawl on the finish line.
And that brawl on the finish line is, you get shoved around, pushed around. It's not easy, is it, for a rider or for the press officer who's with them or anyone else. It's really stressful, particularly in races like the Tour de France.
Yeah, and it's also quite dangerous. Imagine it's a sprint finish, but then you've got another bunch shooting through the finish line moments later, but yet you've got all the journalists, media, everyone wants a piece of the winner who's like crashed on the floor, they can't even breathe, lying down, and then you've got bikes flying past in sprints 60 kilometers an hour or more. It's quite dramatic. So it's dramatic, it's dangerous, and I think it's hard for everyone, but it's live. You're there, you can feel it, you can see what's happening, you definitely see the emotion of the riders and how it means to win or how it means to lose. Yeah, it's kind of sad to see that go, because if the TV cameras can't get there, they can't quite get in, they can't ask those questions, those really important questions. But is it really nice for anybody? No. I don't think it's nice for them to work and try to get that question or try and get in there while the rider's sweating and suffering. But yeah, that's one of the great things about cycling, but maybe not the most productive or the best things. And yeah, for this year, it's not happening. You can't get close to the rider straight after the finish line. And maybe it's better, though. I don't know. I'm a bit torn, in my opinion. It makes my work personally a lot easier and the rider's life a lot easier. They can compose themselves and then start speaking.
Have you found that the riders, because of it, actually respond to the media better? Because they go, okay, I could take time, consider, think about things, give the answer I wanted to give.
Definitely, yeah. I actually noticed it with Simon Yates in Torino Adriatico. The Yates brothers don't really like media. It's not that they like riding the bike, but they don't really like all the other things, like having to do countless interviews, which I understand. And yeah, I think, for example, a rider like Simon, it was good. He had time to, okay, I've finished the race. I'm in the lead. I'm in the leader's jersey. Don't come too close to me. Stand away, and now, one by one, ask me your questions. And he gave really good, detailed answers. He didn't have much time to think about the answers, but he was able to be relaxed after the finish, even just check the results, because often riders finish the line, they don't actually know. Alright, they might know the position on the GC or the stage position, but they don't know time gaps, they don't know all this information, and then they're thrown into an interview and asked random questions that they don't even know the answers themselves because they've not watched the race. And one of the interviews, actually, Simon was watching back what had just happened in the final, because he didn't know. When you're in the moment, you don't really know what's going on behind, do you? So yeah, he definitely had more time to give good, longer answers, and I've seen it a lot. Well, we saw it in the Tour de France as well. The riders able to talk for a bit longer and think about what they want to say, and it's a bit more calculated, so it's not as raw, but you still get a really good answer, I think, and a better, more respectful response, actually.
That's good to know. So things are changing with this coronavirus pandemic as far as the way that things are managed after the race is concerned. Great to get that little bit of insight as to what it's like on the finish line of a race like Tirreno Adriatico, Giro d'Italia, those sort of races. 5:49 now for the leading group of riders. It's not changed. Jonas Koch, Torsten Train, Marco Friedrich, Daniel Fomenich, Yuki Arashiro, Edward Grosso and Ulises Castillo are the riders who are in that front group at the moment. 5:49, 189 kilometres to go. We've got 7 laps of racing now remaining to decide this world title. Things will evolve now over the next 80 odd kilometres till we get to the magic 100 kilometres to go. Then things will really start to hot up as the riders get into the what they consider to be the key moments of this year's race, and then into the final 40 kilometres where this race will, I'm sure, really ignite as we decide who's going to take this year's world title. 5:49, the peloton seem to be showing a little bit more interest in bringing this gap back a little bit more. They seem to be riding on the front at a slightly higher tempo. The front group now at 47.5 kilometres an hour. The peloton at 34.6. Denmark continue with their work rate on the front. They've put a couple of riders up there to try and just keep the tempo nice and high. Switzerland the same, and the same with the Slovenian team. Switzerland constantly using Sylvain Dillier. We just caught a glimpse at the back there of Tom Dumoulin. He's now moved himself back up into the peloton. He was sitting right on the back. Dumoulin staying out of any trouble. He's moved up to about midway through the peloton now, and is trying to just stay with the team to the next point on the horizon, which will be that 100 kilometre to go point. That's when we'll start to see things really start to form up, where you'll see the different lines of riders. This is Asadov of Azerbaijan, who was trying to get involved in the mix a little while earlier. Daniel Baker, why do the Swiss riders have stickers on the front of their jerseys? I noticed that too. And it's riders who've got their sponsors on the Swiss jersey. I don't think they've had the sponsor actually printed onto their kit. So like Sylvain Dillier's got Agir du Zèle Mondial printed on a label on the front of that jersey. So Daniel, thank you for that message. That is, I think, why they've got those particular stickers. Ghost Rider, do I think Richie Porte can continue good form and win a medal today? I think we talked about that a little while ago. Richie Porte got a really good chance of winning this road race, and I'm sure that's why he's chosen to come here and ride. Having missed the birth of his daughter, he's now here at the World Championship, so he went home and he's now got the chance of maybe adding a rainbow bands to his third place in the Tour de France. I think Richie's going to give this a really good push this afternoon. Mark Nielsen, how do team dynamics in a World Championship differ compared to riding regular World Tour events? Do cyclists at some point think about medals for themselves? Interesting question. We've had all sorts of moments in World Championships where it seems like trade team alliances have got mixed up with their countries' alliances, and therefore the World Road Champs has slightly changed its dynamic, and it will change depending on how riders feel about riding for their country or their country's chances compared to their trade team winning. We've had moments such as a famous one for Great Britain where Charlie Wegelius and Tom Southam were banned from riding for Great Britain ever again after riding for Italy in the World Championships. It was quite obvious that they had ridden, and that decision was taken, and that is where they decided to ride for their trade teams, which were based more in that region at the time, than to ride for the British squads. So that happened. We've also seen moments where you've seen counter-attacks in the World Championships, either predetermined or just happened because they didn't know a rider was up the road, which has changed the shape of a World Championship. We think of Greg LeMond and Jock Bauer in the World Championship in 1982 in Goodwood, where LeMond jumped across, but he said that that was a moment that was taken and it just happened, and ended up with Giuseppe Cerrone taking the world title. So it does happen. We read yesterday, and there was an interview with Julien Alaphilippe yesterday, and also Patrick Lefevre, who's the head of the De Koning Quick-Step team of Julien Alaphilippe, showing how strong their team actually is, because Dries Devenens has decided not to ride for his country because he doesn't want to be in a scenario where he would have to chase down his teammate Julien Alaphilippe. He did not want to be in that scenario, knowing that Alaphilippe is one of the race favourites for today's World Championship. So he decided that he'd rather stay at home than to be asked by the Belgian team to chase down his teammate from De Koning Quick-Step. So the dynamics of cycling, as far as trade teams and countries are concerned, are significantly different when it comes to World Championship time. If you'd like to get in touch with Lucy and I, at LucyMartin05, at Ant McCrossan is where you can get hold of us. Biggles213, thanks for your message. The crowd is urging these riders on, staying off the road, which is very good news. We're not seeing too much disruption. The fans are staying back as much as possible and trying to stay off the road where it is possible to let the riders get past safely.
Yeah, there's really a lot of fans out there today, isn't there? We saw some in the women's race on the climbs in particular, but today this is quite impressive, and it's cold. You can see everybody's got jackets on, but to be standing out there all day for almost 7 hours, that's commitment, and it's great when you can see all the different flags. We've seen obviously a lot of Italian flags. I think everybody, like the riders, the peloton, everybody's just so happy that there's racing back after that prolonged period when the world went into lockdown and we missed so many races for months, and now every single race that we do, it's just a bonus, and you can see that with the fans on the roadside. They just love it. Everybody's so passionate.
The fans at the roadside, though, are predominantly Italian. You and I have talked about this over the last 4 days. We've done 5 World Championships together. This is a different time, but it feels like a World Championship, but not quite in the same way, because you don't have all the nationalities by the weekend that you normally have. Normally by now, as we see the Costa Rican rider here on camera, Kevin Rivera, normally by now there are camper vans everywhere. There are different nationalities having parties all around the course, and particularly in the finish area, The party is massive. You hear all the different accents, nationalities and everything. It's nothing like that, is it?
No, and I mean, that's as to be expected in this crazy season, this crazy year. But at the same time, I mean, we're also starting and finishing on a Formula One racing track, so it's quite different to be finishing like last year in Harrogate city centre. You've got bars, cafes, restaurants, people out and about, dressed in all the different colours of their own countries, face paint, everything, in the street and enjoying the day, even drinking, eating all day long, actually enjoying their own day and then nipping out and watching the course, the riders come past each lap. Whereas here, yeah, we are on a Formula One circuit, so there's nothing here. It's really restricted entry, which makes it a lot safer for everybody, which is exactly what we need in these times. And as you said, yeah, the majority of the people on the roadside are Italian after all the travel restrictions and how hard it is to actually travel. But for that reason, I'm still so impressed that there's so many people out there on the climbs. I actually thought there would be less, given the situation and how hard it is to get here and the restrictions. So that's really, really nice to see. But it's a bit sad. The World Championships, it's one of the best races because people just get so patriotic, so passionate. And yeah, we often see so much fancy dress, like the Dutch people. You can spot them. Everybody's wearing orange all the time in the street. Everyone's just loving the whole atmosphere of the Worlds. For me, it's just so different to any other race, and for this reason, I think it's my favourite race of the whole season. It's just special.
I haven't seen one drunk Belgian fan yet, though.
Because they're all in Belgium.
Because they're all in Belgium. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. We do have camper vans at the top of the climb, but nothing like we would normally expect to have. But we have a bike race, and that is the most important thing. Getting to the top of the climb now, the riders have ridden up that pretty well, 5:15. They crest that to around 20 kilometres an hour. Now it continues up for a little while. The riders on their bikes today, we've talked about tyres, we've talked about nutrition. In terms of gearing, what sort of gearing have the riders got on their bikes? Have they just gone with a standard setup, or will they change anything today?
Well, I think in general, a standard like Shimano component gearing would be, for a men's road race, probably 53 chainring on the front, 36 the small chainring, and then on the back it can vary, it depends. But I think today, today it would normally it would be 53 on the front and like 39. But today we've seen how steep the climbs are, how really hard it is, and how much of a race of attrition. It's 18 climbs it's almost 5,000 meters of climbing in the whole day. So I think most people are riding 53 on the front, but 36 as the small chainring, and then 11:30 on the back. So 11 being the smallest, hardest gear, and 30 being the easiest, because it's a wearing down process. So you need to have the small chainring, the small gear accessible and easily accessible. But in saying that, that's what most riders would have. It's a really, really small gear. It's the kind of gearing ratio that you would see in Flèche Wallonne in a mountain stage of the Tour de France. It's a really small gear combination, so that you can now in these early stages just pedal with a really high cadence up the climbs, not have a big wearing down gear, not really have to drag out the effort, and save your legs, save your muscles, save your energy for later when you need to do the really big attacks. But in saying that, there will still be some of the old school, traditional, older riders. I think Luis Leon Sanchez,
38-year-olds.
Yeah, 38-year-olds would still choose to ride the standard 53 on the front, 59 small chainring as opposed to the 36. So it differs for everyone, but that's pretty hardcore to power up the climb. But some riders, not many, do prefer to just grind out a big gear. It's not
like Luis Leon Sanchez, Alejandro Valverde would be on a 53.39.
Yeah, well, I think actually Valverde races with SRAM coming from the Movistar team, so it's slightly different. But Yeah, some of those riders do prefer a bigger gear, but in general, most of the peloton, 80% of the peloton, would probably have a 36 small chainring on the front and have 30 on the back, which it's really small, but you need it on this kind of terrain if you want to save your legs. I mean, when they're attacking, it doesn't necessarily mean they're in the smallest gear later on in the race, but it's more just to save your legs and be able to go down to the easiest gear and not really start pushing, because obviously when you're going slow now up the climbs, to have a big gear, it takes so much energy out of your legs, and it's actually really a hard thing to learn, is to ride with a small gear. One rider, female rider, I always think of is Marianne Vos. She's a really good rider of just spinning the legs. All day long you just see her spinning, not grinding a gear. But you have to train, because finally it's not even about the cadence, having a high cadence. It's also your heart rate can be higher because you're spinning your legs faster. But you save your muscles because you're not pushing. It's not about power and force. It's just about spinning your legs high cadence as fast as possible. So early in the races like this, when you've still got 181 kilometers to go, it's really, really important. And of course, all these riders, they know how important this is. They've done Grand Tours, they've done many races where you just need to save energy early on and not grind a gear. But even here, look, the cadence is pretty slow. It just shows how steep these climbs are.
They're riding at 14 kilometers an hour. Sylvain Dillier on the front. We just saw him a while ago riding, as you said, with high cadence, sitting down, really small gear. It looks like he's going really quick, but he's doing 15k an hour. And that is to just save the legs, save the muscles, make sure you're all right later on in the race. That's set up then, just to remind you, 53.36 with a 30-tooth ring on the back, sprocket on the back, that the riders will just be in for this race. We're starting to see a little bit more tiredness within this peloton. Some riders starting to feel the climbs. Next time round, we're going to come through with 6 laps of racing to go. There'll be a few riders who've been riding the Tour de France who won't quite have even warmed up yet. They'll be thinking, right, the body's going to come round soon. I'm not necessarily having a great day, but suddenly you can feel good.
Yeah, that's always a weird thing in these long races. How so many different states that your body can go through. It's not a case of you start and, oh, I'm having a bad day. You could be having the worst day and then win the race. So many riders, time and time again, say, oh no, I was feeling awful all day, and then I followed an attack, and then I felt good. Sometimes it takes like a really hard effort to kind of get your body into action. And yeah, some of the older riders, some of the riders, like you said, who've just been to the Tour de France, it'll take a while to just get the engine going again.
Yeah. 5:13, 180 kilometres to go. The peloton now over this climb. They'll go across the ridge and get themselves set up for the descent that is coming up next on the horizon. The pace is still being set by the team of Switzerland, behind Denmark always near the front. Switzerland seem to be riding very strongly on the front, looking after the interests of Mark Hirschi and Michael Albertini for later on in the race. Slovenia take over again. They are going to contribute. So are Denmark. So it's now 3 teams sharing the pacemaking on the front. Switzerland, Denmark and Slovenia. Slovenia's in that green, white and blue kit that you can see there on the front of the peloton. Just keeping the tempo as high as possible.
So we've not seen the French team really come to the front yet, have we? Or the Belgians. And of course, they have 2 potential winners, 2 favourites in the race, with Alaphilippe, of course, from France, and then Wout van Aert from Belgium. And for the moment, they're happy to sit back and let the other nations do all the chasing on the front and profit from it later, use their men later on in the race when they really need them. So for those 2 nations with favourites. It's a really good moment for them now. They're not really having to do too much work. They're just sitting back and leaving it all up to the Danes, the Swiss, and also the Slovenian team.
We're just flying over Brisighella, the medieval town. It was awarded with an orange flag by the touring club. It's certified one of the most beautiful villages by Borghi d'Italia, and as a slow city and city of olive oil and wine, made up of a maze of different alleyways, ancient walls, little stairs. Lovely place to just wander around during the race. In the centre of that, you would have seen the clock tower, or Our Lady of Time, as the locals like to call it. Front group of riders still maintaining their advantage. Let's come back to talk about the French team a little bit, as we see the peloton making its way down in towards the circuit yet again. 178 kilometres to go. The French squads have got Julien Alaphilippe, Julien Bernard, Kenny Elissonde, Valentin Madouas, Guillaume Martin, Rudy Mollard, Quentin Pacher and Nons Peters. That is actually a really strong team. When you go through it, Julien Alaphilippe, stage winner in the Tour de France this year and yellow jersey. Valentin Madouas, who rode so well in the final week or so, once he was given free rein to do what he wanted to do. Guillaume Martin, who was challenging early on in the race, sitting in the top 3, eventually ended up in the top 15. Nons Peters, who was a stage winner in the Tour de France this year. Quentin Pacher, who was one of the most attacking riders of this year's Tour de France. At one point, he was standing in the overall standing as the rider who'd been in breakaways for the most kilometres in this year's Tour de France. And that was when we got in towards the beginning of the 3rd week of racing. So that team has got to be all in for Julien Alaphilippe, though.
Yeah, definitely. And I think most of those riders actually raced in the Tour de France, as you said. So in theory, they should be in good form. In hope that they've all recovered well, then they should be in good form today. And of course, yeah, Alaphilippe, one of the out-and-out favourites for today's race, if it doesn't come down to the pure climbers. But of course, we know he can climb. Last year, how many days did he have the yellow jersey? He's shown what he can do. He even came second in Milan-San Remo after saying he wasn't even in good form, so it just shows he was in good form, really. Maybe not the top form he was hoping, but he could handle the longer distances. He had not his best Tour de France, really, this year, was it? But in saying that, it wasn't because of necessarily because of his form and his fitness. It's just how the race played out. And, yeah, he's got to be really excited for today's race and have his chance, a real good chance to be a world champion.
Julien Alaphilippe, 8th in Innsbruck in 2018. He said in his pre-race interviews, we're the outsiders, but it doesn't mean we've got no ambition. I've managed my effort in the Tour de France, and this race will be decided in the final kilometres as we get towards the hard part of this year's race. So Julien Alaphilippe heading the French team. The gap's been brought down to under 5 minutes now under the speed of the Slovenian team, with also the Danish squad up near the front. Alaphilippe you can never discount. We saw him win stage 2 of the Tour de France ahead of Mark Hirschi and Adam Yates. He then wore the yellow jersey. He lost the yellow jersey, of course, because he took a bottle in the final 20 kilometres of a stage a couple of days later. And then really we didn't see Alaphilippe of last year at any point during the Tour. He went on some escapades, but he just didn't quite have the legs with which to finish things off in 2020. But maybe, as he was saying during the Tour de France, it was all about the World Championships. He's been saying all along that he wants to take the victory in this year's race. It's been quite a while since a French rider won the World Championships. Little bit of increase in pace in the leading group. They sense that the gap is coming down to around 5 minutes, so they've got to start just thinking about whether they increase the tempo a little bit more. 175 kilometres of racing still to go.
Yeah, we've still got a long way to go today, haven't we? And that's why we're seeing the time gap still out there, still at 5 minutes. But it is slowly coming back now. I mean, also these riders in the peloton, the team's chasing, they don't want to wait until last minute, and we've still got a long way to go, it's fine, but they just want to slowly increase the pace and draw the riders back, not let them have too much of a big advantage out the front, and not have to really put too much effort in. And I think that's why we're seeing the Danes and the Swiss team happy to take it up on the front, because it's also safer. You just stay at the front, do a little bit of work, but without really exerting yourself too much. Whereas the French, the Belgians, are still happy to sit back and wait in the peloton.
One team we haven't talked about yet is the team of the USA, with Lawson Craddock, Sepp Kuss, Brandon McNulty, Neilson Powless. That's the team of the USA today. What can we see from the USA later on in the race?
Yeah, we have to really, all eyes point on Sepp Kuss, don't they? He's only, well, I was going to say he's young. He's not young, really. He's 26. That's old nowadays in cycling.
As old as 38.
Exactly. He's had a really rise to the top, a really quick rise to the top. He, of course, won the Tour of Utah in 2018. Last year, won a stage of the Vuelta, 4th on a stage at the Tour recently. He's been really strong, and he's one of the favourites, but maybe goes a little bit under the radar, don't you think?
He does, yeah. But what, do you think that they'll just go all in for Sepp Kuss today?
No, probably not. I think they'll keep it quite open, and again, depends how the race plays out, but they've got options. Craddock's also a strong rider. Last year he was 6th in the time trial, so if you can finish 6th in the World Championship time trial, you're strong. You've got that strength. So they've got various options, and I think that's also quite a good position to be in. It's great to have one out-and-out leader, but if you've got options, the other teams also don't know who you're working for, so you can kind of play the game, you can attack, counter-attack, and they don't really know who you're riding for.
Sepp Kuss rode so well in the Tour de France in support of Primož Roglic. Now he's given free rein to do what he wants. If he's recovered from the Tour de France, then we could see Sepp Kuss on the attack. He won a stage of the Dauphiné when he was given free rein. As we see now, the leading group of riders, Cochrane, Friedrich, Fominik, Arashiro, Grosso and Castillo, cross the line with 6 laps of racing to go. The gap now stands at 4:36. But Sepp Kuss, when he was given the opportunity to win a stage of the Dauphiné, he took it with both hands, went away, took the victory. Let's see whether he can do something today when the attacks start to happen. There's no doubt if he's recovered, he'll have the legs to go with it. Neilson Powless was a rider in the Tour who was really impressive on the attack on many days of the Tour de France. And it was great to see a young rider like Neilson Powless do what he did in the Tour and not be scared of taking the race on. He'll have learnt a lot. The question is whether he's got 258 kilometres in his legs.
Yeah, and that all depends on how he's recovered, and as we were talking about earlier, it's so different. All riders recover differently. He's only 24, so that is still quite young to do a Tour de France and 1 week later recover. But with that, he's young, he benefits from being young and fit, and yeah, as you said, in the Tour de France he was really strong. He didn't get a stage win, but he was consistent. I think he had a 4th and 5th place on 2 different stages, so he was up there around the mark. And with having that USA team quite open, not necessarily a key leader, it's quite different, isn't it? When you go into a trade team and you're a domestique, sometimes you get your opportunity, but it might only be 1 or 2 times a year. The rest of the time you're working for someone. So if you do get the opportunity, if their tactic is to keep it quite open, ride for whoever's feeling good on the day, it completely changes. These riders don't get opportunities that often. And as you said with Sepp Kuss, in the Dauphiné, when he got his opportunity, he took it and he won. Doesn't always play out like that, but I'm sure it's the World Championships. Any rider that gets an opportunity to go free, to ride for themselves, they're going to take it. And especially if the course suits them, if they're feeling in good form, good shape after the Tour de France, they've recovered, it's the perfect moment to really put your mark on the peloton, show who you are. And it was kind of the same thing last year with Pedersen taking the victory. He wasn't necessarily a favourite, was he? But he had an opportunity and he took it, and he made himself known to the world, winning in Yorkshire.
Mark Nielsen was just asking, where is the 2019 champion? Probably on his sofa watching the race.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got his feet up. He'll be sad that he'll be no longer the world champion, but this is definitely not his cup of tea. It's not a course that suits him, and it's quite odd really, because we would normally see almost every defending champion just lining up anyway, just to be here to try and defend the jersey, even if the course doesn't suit them. But with a course like this, it's so hard. It's almost pointless turning up. I know that sounds degrading. He is a world champion, but it's just, he's not a climber. It's not the kind of course that would suit him. It's not a course for sprinters. So why travel? There's coronavirus. You want to restrict your travel. You've still got loads of races left to do in this season. You don't want to get sick. You want to recover well. Pick and choose your moments. Choose your races that really suit you. And obviously he decided it wasn't worth coming here today to try and defend his world title, but that's how the world's is. One year it's more of a classics style rider, one year it's a sprint, next year it's a climbers race.
The peloton making their way in now to complete this lap. They will have 6 laps of racing to go. They've brought this gap down a little bit to 5:20. We saw a time check there of 3 minutes something, but that was not correct. So Grossu still in this lead group. Seems to be riding well today. There's Daniel Fominik riding for the team of Kazakhstan in that turquoise and blue colour. Fominik wearing number 145 today. 29 years of age now, Daniel Fominik. He's won the Asian Time Trial Championships on a couple of occasions during his career. Peloton now not far away. They're on the Imola circuit, this famous Formula One racetrack. They go past the memorial of Ayrton Senna, which is around about 1 kilometre from the finish line. Now the rider from Greece has decided to support the pacemaking. This is Polykronos Touzakis, who is on the front and now trying to set the tempo. Maybe he's decided, well, I didn't get in the breakaway. I'm from Greece. I've got one rider myself. So let's just show that I'm here. And that's important as he sets the tempo now on the front of the peloton. They're rolling through. Just caught a glimpse of all the Australian team towards the back, all surrounding Richie Porte and Michael Matthews. Staying totally out of trouble, the Australian team.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good to see that they've got that cohesion. They're all riding together because, of course, they're all on very different trade teams, as we discussed earlier. How do they work together when they just come together for one day for the World Championships? But they know at the moment it's fine. Nothing's really happening. The breakaway's gone away, so they can just kind of relax a little bit. Maybe not the best place to sit towards the back, but everybody has their own personal preference, and they're together, so they're probably just having a chat, reminding themselves to eat and drink, and they know it's getting into the tricky part now. We're almost halfway through the race, and they really need to stay focused. And as we can see, we've got one rider, I think it's Nick Schultz, who's come to the front there for Australia. Next to him, Michael Matthews. So they've decided to go from the back round to the front while they've got these wider roads before they head out back up onto the climbs. And it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I have a good feeling about the Australian team today. I feel like they could come out on top. They've got 2 great potential winners with Michael Matthews and Richie Porte, and I think they've got quite a mixed team, riders from different trade teams, but I think they could have a really, really good shot. They've got, of course, Nick Schultz, who rides for Mitchelton Scott, and they've also got Damien Howson, so that's 2 riders from the same team. Michael Matthews going to Mitchelton Scott next year, that was recently announced. So 3 riders that know each other well, they're both around the similar age, so they've grown up cycling in Australia together, and now they're here at the World Championships. And it's actually quite a fairly young team, isn't it, when you look down the list?
Yeah, Luke Durbridge as well in the team. Simon Clark, who is a great climber. He's won the King of the Mountains in the Vuelta a España before. Chris Hamilton, Jai Hindley and Richie Porte. It's a team of real stars and a team of great climbers. Yeah,
and a team that, as I said, they're on different trade teams, but they all know each other really well. They've all been around for years. I miss Luke Durbridge, actually. Of course, he rides for Mitchelton Scott as well. Simon Clark used to ride for Mitchelton Scott, so they've all been teammates. They all know each other really well. And I think it's so important when it's like that, and you really know how another teammate's feeling if you've been their teammate before, if you've been riding with them before. And they'll have come in today knowing they've got a winner in the team, knowing they've got somebody who can win. And of course that makes a big difference. It's different if you come into the World Championships and maybe the course suits you, maybe somebody's in good form. They know they've got two riders in top form and they can win today.
168 kilometres to go. Let's see how Australia do later on in the race, see if they can pull off a huge victory in this World Championships. The leading group of riders, those of you just joining us, stays the same. Nothing has evolved as far as that's concerned. Some of you asking me how many South Africans in the race. 2 South Africans, Nicholas Dlamini and Luis Menkes. Those are the 2 South Africans in the squad. They've just got to use the other teams to try and put themselves in a position to win this world title. Luis Menkes, no doubt, a very good climber. I would have thought Nicholas Dlamini is going to ride for Luis Menkes and try and keep him in the right position, try and get him to the point where he can try and challenge for this year's race. It would be nice to see Luis Menkes pull something off here. A rider who, over the last couple of years, has not necessarily shone at the level we were expecting. So we'll see whether he can produce a result today. Nicholas Dlamini, lovely story about him. He's a rider who grew up in a very poverty-stricken background. He was discovered by a group of cyclists from the UK and others from South Africa, and they helped him with training and bikes and everything. He was also mentored a little bit by Ben Swift from Team Ineos, and now he's in the World Tour and he's in the World Championships. Nicholas Dlamini of South Africa. 167 kilometres to go. Our leading group heading towards the next climb of the day. We just keep saying this, next climb of the day coming up, because there is basically no flat road in this year's World Championships. There's one little stretch, but apart from that, and that's on the finishing circuit, the autodrome, the finish line circuit. Apart from that, pretty much the road goes up or goes down. There is no other rest.
Yeah, and it's always hard to really see and feel how it is just watching on TV. You don't really see the gradients, but even a small rise in the road, it's not flat, it's really wearing. And I just love the shots when you get to the bottom of the climb and you can just look up to the top, and it must just be so tough if you're suffering towards the end of the race and you can see where the finish line, the finish of the climb is, the summit, 2 kilometres ahead, and you've got to tackle that steep slope to get there. It must be really, really hard. But I think these climbs in particular, the reason they're so tricky is they're steep. They get up to 13-14% gradients, but they've got so many, I was going to say false flat. It's not even false flat. They just keep dragging and dragging and dragging. So it's not like you do your effort and you go over the top and straight down the descent. You go up the steepest section, and then it just continues at 8, 9, 10% all the way up and over. You have a descent, but then you have to focus, make sure you stay safe, narrow, twisty, and then before you know it, you're climbing again on a small rise, on a grippy road, and fly around the Formula 1 circuit on not really smooth, fast surfaces. And then before you know it, you're back out again. So it's true, we just keep saying, here's the next climb, because that's what it's like. It's just constant. And there's 18 climbs to contend with. Almost 5,000 metres of altitude gain.
It's a lot of metres of altitude gain today in this World Championship. As I said earlier on in the start of today's programme, it's more than any stage of the Tour de France this year. On the front of the peloton, still Greece represented by the same rider, He's rolling along at the front, just keeping the Greek jersey in the camera. That's Polychronis Zorzakis. Switzerland constantly with Sylvain Dillier. Poland are now starting to come forward on the left-hand side in the red and white, doing a little bit of pace-making. Germany moving up as well.
Also Belgium, I saw for probably the first time today. It was Greg Van Avermaet on the left-hand side of the road. Of course, the Olympic champion with his golden helmet, easy to spot. And yeah, we've not really seen Belgium to come towards the front. They have a really strong team, and of course they have probably the out-and-out favourite.
Who's the out-and-out favourite?
Van Aert.
You think so?
So many people have been saying his name, and after his performance in the time trial, after his performances this year, surely he has to be. But I wonder if he's too much of a marked man. People know he is on fire this season. 26-year-old, he won 2 stages at the Tour de France. He won a stage at Dauphiné, Strade Bianche, Milan-San Remo. Really come into his form this season. Of course, he's been good in the past, but this year he's just phenomenal. He's on another level.
He is. That team, though, is exceptional, isn't it? Tiesj Benoot, Oliver Naesen, Peter Seri, Jasper Stuyven, Wout van Aert, Greg Van Avermaet, Loic Vliegen, Tim Wellens. That's a team you would want if you were a sponsor.
Yeah, and it's a team you'd want if you were trying to win the World Championships, to have all these riders surrounding you, supporting you, and here on the start line in good form.
The last Belgian world champion, Philippe Gilbert, in 2012. That attack on the Kouberg managed to gain him that victory. Let's see if Belgium can succeed Gilbert to take the world title today. Last one, 2012. But they've got so many options to play if things start to go wrong. Tiesj Benoot set things up for Mark Hirschi and Soren Kragh Andersen in the Tour de France to take victories for Team Sunweb. He's a good team player, but he's also won Strade Bianche himself. So he's a rider who likes Italy as far as victories are concerned. Wout van Aert, everyone is talking about him as a possible winner today. Has he got enough left after the Tour de France and the time trial the other day to have good legs to put himself in a position to win this world title later on this afternoon?
It's just phenomenal, though, what he can do. Now we're talking about him as being the hot favourite for a 258-kilometre road race World Championships. He's won 4 cyclocross World Championship titles. That's an hour and a half of intense racing.
Yeah.
Whereas today's reaching 7 hours, and yet he can do it.
But we know he's got the distance because Milano-San Remo is 300k, so we know that he can ride at that level, no problem at all. The Milano-San Remo is different. It's pretty much rolling and flat until you get towards the first climbs, the little Capiberta and all those climbs on the run into the Cipressa and the Poggio, but he's done it. He can definitely be there at the finish today.
Yeah, you put him in a sprint, he can win. If it's a hard race, you put him in a time trial, he can get a World Championship medal. He seems to be the man that can do everything. We've seen that over the years, the likes of Sagan, who seems to be able to be so all-round and do many things, but now the talk of this year, for me, it has to be Van Aert.
No doubt whatsoever. We'll see whether Van Aert can win the world title for Belgium later on this afternoon. Up to 164 kilometres to go now. Another team we haven't talked about, Colombia. Now, they have got some squad. For this amount of climbing, they all have grown up at altitude. This is, for them, perfect. Esteban Chavez, Sergio Henao, Sergio Higuita, who crashed in the Tour after that touch of wheels and was out of the race. Miguel Angel Lopez, who lost his podium position on the penultimate day. Dani Martinez, stage winner in the Dauphiné. Christian Munoz and Harold Teaja. That's the team of Colombia. That's some team.
Yeah, it is a really strong team. Did you mention Uran?
Well, I didn't mention Uran. Just add him in as well. Rigoberto Uran.
Easy to forget.
Yeah, add in Rigoberto Uran, and then you've got an amazing team.
I was just looking through the list and I was thinking there's somebody, a key player we're missing, and of course it's Uran. The showman that he is, how could we forget? Tour de France, 8th place overall. He had a really great Tour de France campaign, didn't he? So it's an impressive team. I don't even know who would they ride for. If you were the national coach, who would you ride for? Would you keep it open? Would you just see what happens on the road? Would you pick a clear leader?
I think it's really hard because you've got Esteban Chavez, who on his day could win. You've got Sergio Higuita, who no doubt in the Tour de France was superb. He was there in the climbs, he was there in the sprints until he crashed. He had so many opportunities. Miguel Angel Lopez, stage winner in the Tour, and was sitting in the podium positions until the penultimate day. Martinez, who won a stage of the Dauphiné just a few weeks ago. Tejada is such a strong rider at 21 years of age. And Rigoberto Uran, who's done everything. So it's hard. What do you do? I don't even know how you start. Maybe you ask the riders, who should we ride for?
Yeah, and as we keep saying today, it just depends how they've come out of the Tour de France. How have they recovered? How are they feeling? We might be able to say on paper it could be a day for Uran. He might be feeling really bad after the Tour de France. We don't know. He probably doesn't know, even in the race. We don't know until the final moments of this race today how the legs are going to cope with having that workload of 3 weeks of racing and then 1 week later lining up to do a 258-kilometre World Championship road race. So, yeah, there's certainly a team full of climbers, full of really strong contenders for today's race. I'm not sure. I think it's all round, they've got to be one of the strongest teams, don't you think? Other teams have got multiple winners, potential winners, but I think the Colombians have the numbers.
Also, we're not at high altitude here. They get better at 2,000 metres, but these are climbs. They're not going to find them quite as difficult. You saw some of the Colombians coming here. Did they give you any little insight as to who they were riding for, or did they keep it all quiet?
No, and I tried to get it out of them, but they didn't. Or maybe they didn't really know, to be honest. Yeah, but I think, I mean, I say there's such a strong team in terms of they've got the numbers, but at the same time, as you just said, they're all from high altitude places where they've grown up. They're generally better on long climbs. We saw Lopez take that impressive stage win after a really, really hard, long climb. Today it's 2-3 kilometre climbs. It's not quite the same. It's a different ball game. It's almost a different discipline. You still need to be able to climb. You still need to be a really strong climber. But if you're going head to head with these guys on a 10, 15